Brussels' attack on freedom of speech and the tough response from the United States could break up NATO. First of all, of course, we should finish not with NATO, but with the United Nations, and only then with NATO. There are all sorts of things like the Paris Accords and so on, if they still exist. The United States has launched a campaign to restore freedom of speech in Europe. If it doesn't work out, the United States will withdraw from the alliance. The main reason we protect you, said the White House, is because we share common humanitarian values. If we don't have them, if you no longer adhere to them, then why should we protect you? Ladies and gentlemen, Europe has taken a seat. But that's actually not all. If you keep letting Muslims in, we'll hang you on a rusty nail. I told you about stealing $9 billion, which apparently was covered up by the governor of Minnesota, that is Tim Walz, who was a former vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. And today I'll tell you about the governor of California, my favorite, under whom I live, and who apparently covered up the theft of a much larger sum. And our state is bigger, yes, $78 billion disappeared, but let's start with international events. Something truly incredible has actually happened. Marco Rubio announced that an investigation into anti-American activities by employees of the European Union and the United Kingdom is beginning. Anti-American activity refers to censorship of American journalists and politicians, as well as the banning of American radio, television, and internet programs in the media and online. It's nearly impossible to broadcast freely in Europe. And other actions aimed at restricting freedom of speech, the speech of Americans, that is. The center and some organizations have stood out, and we've already taken action against them. The Center for Countering Hate is located in London. He published reports on American disinformation and coordinated campaigns, lobbied the government, European countries, to pressure United States social networks and to finish off ex-Musk. The main blow was directed that way. That is, to achieve the ability to act against undesirable accounts on social networks. So basically, Europe would have the ability to just take them and shut them down, just access the system, contact others, and shut them down. What does that mean? Why were they inconvenient? Because they criticized wackism, let's say, and all sorts of other globalist nonsense that they, believe in or not, but keep pushing. A visa is not a right, it's a privilege. A visa. The right to enter the United States has been taken away from the head of the organization I told you about, Imran Ahmed. His name is, of course, he's British, a real 100% Brit. So the leaders now hate aid from Germany. That one was from Britain. These are from Germany. They organized lawsuits and complaints against social networks for insufficient moderation. It's about non-censorship in Russian translation. They wanted it censored a certain way, but it was done differently or less. Josefina Balin and Annalena von Gindenberg, apparently a relative of Gindenberg, have been banned from entering the United States for inciting hatred against the United States. If you hate us, you shouldn't come here. From my point of view, the Global Disinformation Index, why do people love giving such grand names, even to distract from what they're actually doing? So, the Global Disinformation Index. They compiled blacklists of United States media and journalists who wrote articles and programs that were unfavorable to globalism, wokeness, and collectivism, and pressured advertisers to stop advertising in right-wing American publications. So, you're trying to shut us Americans up, right? The head of the center, Claire Melford, Yes, Claire Melford. Oh, that's probably Claire Melford. That's her first and last name. I thought that was the name of the center. So she has been denied a United States visa. European Parliament Commissioner Thierry Breton personally threatened American platforms, meaning social networks, with large fines for not removing right-wing content. So if you don't remove what we don't like, yes, you'll have to pay fines to them. So this is simply the European Union itself, not just some organization, but the European Union itself, that tried to interfere with Americans' freedom of speech. The European Commission strongly condemned it, like the 364th Chinese condemnation or another, and then imposed a visa ban. We're not letting 5 people in for now, but we'll keep banning more, stating that the European Union reserves the right to take retaliatory measures. Well, guys, of course you have every right to take retaliatory measures. By the way, that's unclear. So Brussels then emphasizes that the European Union has the sovereign right to take retaliatory actions against any unfounded steps by the United States. What does that mean? Maybe they want us to justify these steps, or maybe they'll decide for themselves which are justified. Who knows, but they're clearly dissatisfied. I mean, obviously dissatisfied, and it's right that they're dissatisfied. In fact, that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted them to be dissatisfied. Naturally, the victims themselves, these 5 say that they were defending freedom of speech, no more, no less. It seems they defended freedom of speech by banning the kind of freedom of speech they didn't like. Because you always defend real freedom of speech by suppressing what you consider to be fake freedom of speech, they say they can't be intimidated, that they will continue to fight against American freedom of speech in order to ensure European freedom of speech. Oh God, and they swear to continue applying European rules and laws to suppress the words they don't like. Well, they wrote a law, then they said everything would be legal. Look, we wrote a law, yes, a law. If they told you to first jump on one leg then the other before shooting at you, you'd have to do it. Everything is written down, shot, killed, legal. Yes, guys, we did everything just as the law says. This is probably what freedom of speech looks like, Plekhanov style. Representatives. Representatives of the Global Index, the very one I mentioned, stated that their blacklists aren't really that black, and that, on the contrary, this is actually an expression of Europe's rights. The continuation is not to let advertisers participate in spreading bad American influence on the minds of Europeans. Well, they're afraid, yes, and I remember once Kobzon's son explained in a television interview that there is bad mafia and there is good mafia. I imagine that it's bad. It's not his, not theirs, or his dad's, but his dad's is good. He knows them all. They're good guys. Europe repeated these wise words, saying that there are bad blacklists and there are some made by others, but there are good ones when they make them. Well, they make them themselves. In my opinion, they're the ideological heirs of Goebbels, Trotsky, and Mao Zedong. Imran Ahmad said that the United States and Trump, and Rubio, of course, yes, are racists, and he didn't expect anything else from them. Mark Rubio, in turn, said that the lists of untouchables have been expanded, which we don't even want to touch with a 6-foot pole. And none of those who try to influence the freedom of speech or expression, let's say, of Americans, will be allowed into the United States. The declaration of war against the globalists of the European Union actually began with J. Du Vance's speech at the meeting with European allies, and we will talk about this epical meeting, in my opinion. But let's start with Rubio, who tells journalists, "We are kind of allies with Europe." Well, because of our proximity, the similarity of our views, but somehow we have more in common. Now, in words,
how long has this union been called the Western Alliance? Exactly, and it's not just me saying it. If you go to NATO meetings and talk to people, they'll say our shared history, heritage, values, priorities. That's what they talk about when explaining the reason for the alliance's existence. But if you erase your shared history, culture, ideology, priorities, principles, then what do you have left? A direct defense agreement. That's all you have. That's what I'm trying to point out, what we've been trying to point out. It's very simple. At the foundation of our relationship, for example, with Europe, lies the fact that we have a shared culture, a shared civilization, shared experience, and shared values. In matters such as human rights, freedom, independence, and democracy regarding individual rights. All these things that we, as a nation, have inherited in many cases because many of the inventors of the ideas that led to the founding of our country originated precisely in these places, within the framework of the Western Alliance. If this is removed, if it is destroyed because for some reason it is no longer a priority, I truly believe that this creates tension and threatens the alliance in the long term and overall. As for the internal political reasons why people disagree with this, I won't comment on that except to say this. I truly believe that at the core of these special relations we have is the fact that we share a common history, common values, and common civilizational principles.
It's absolutely true we are the West, which upholds individual freedom and the rule of law. We went through ancient culture, we became the foundation of Judeo-Christian civilization, we went through the Renaissance, the Dark Ages, the Industrial Revolution, the Bastille, the Charter, and from all of this, the Declaration of Independence was born in the United States. If we don't have this in common with you, then why are we together? Then we need to reconsider our relationship. Not to mention that Europe is simply turning into a caliphate, and soon it will have common principles with Iran and Sudan, with Indonesia and Abalia, not with us, Australia or Canada.
This is a nation founded on Western principles such as freedom, the value and rights of the individual, the right to self-government. All of these are Western values. Yes, others may have adopted them in different parts of the world, but they originate from Western history. And that's something we shouldn't apologize for. Why should we apologize for that? Anyone who, for example, fails to see that many aspects of our government come from Roman and Greek history is simply a fool, just a fool. That's simply not true. Therefore, I believe that we need to understand and accept this, not deny it, and I think that's exactly what we're pointing out here. We are concerned that, especially in some parts of Western Europe, the things that form the foundation of our alliance and our ties with them may be at risk in the long term. Some leaders in these countries recognize this. Some discuss it openly, others privately. People in Eastern and Southern Europe discuss this more openly. Still, it remains a factor to consider.
Now let's get back to the United States Vice President and his speech, which caused a storm in Europe, although it was supposed to bring about a sobering effect.
To be continued. The threat that worries me the most regarding Europe is not Russia, not China, and not any other external player. I'm concerned about the internal threat, Europe's departure from some of its most fundamental values, values it shares with the United States of America. I was struck that a former European commissioner recently appeared on television and, with equal pleasure, announced that the Romanian government had just annulled entire elections. He warned that if things don't go according to plan, the same could happen in Germany. Such reckless statements are shocking to the American ear. For years we were told that everything we finance and support is done in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our policy on Ukraine to digital censorship is presented as the defense of democracy. But when we see European courts overturning elections and high-ranking officials threatening to cancel others, we have to ask ourselves, are we really at the limits? Are we upholding high enough standards? And I say we because I truly believe we're on the same side. We should not just discuss democratic values, but also practice them. I look at Brussels, where European Union commissioners are warning citizens that they intend to shut down social networks during times of civil unrest. That moment when they notice what they consider to be, I quote, hate-inciting content. Or at this very country where the police conducted searches of citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, I quote, the fight against misogyny on the Internet Day of Action. I look at Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government condemned a Christian activist for participating in the burning of the Quran. I agree, which led to the murder of his friend. And as the judge in his case noted with frightening candor, Swedish laws that supposedly protect freedom of expression actually do not provide it. And I quote, "There is no free pass to do or say anything without risking offending a group that practices this faith." And perhaps what is most concerning, I am addressing our very dear friends. The United Kingdom, where abandoning conscience rights has especially endangered the fundamental freedoms of religious Britons. Just over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and Army veteran, with a terrible crime. He was standing 50 meters away from an abortion clinic, silently praying for 3 minutes. He wasn't bothering anyone, he wasn't interacting with anyone, he was just silently praying alone. When British law enforcement noticed him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam simply replied that he was praying for his unborn son, whom he and his ex-girlfriend had aborted many years ago. The police officers were not moved by this. Adam was found guilty of violating the new buffer zone law passed by the government. This law criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision. Within a 200-meter radius of the abortion clinic, he was ordered to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. It's a pity I can't say this was an accident, a one-off crazy example of a poorly written law being applied to one person. But no. In October of last year, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began sending letters to citizens whose homes were located in so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer in their own home could be considered a violation of the law.
That is, in Europe, praying in your own home, whether silently or in a low voice, can be considered a crime. Praying to yourself or quietly, you can go to jail for that. 400 years ago, in the year 1600, well, it was their grandfathers and grandmothers who burned them. If you didn't believe in God and now they imprison you for believing in God and praying to God, well, that's what a prayer is. So, do you think when they punish you, imprison you, or burn you, does it matter if it's for faith or for lack of faith? Are they punishing you for that?
Of course, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected of thought crime in Britain and across Europe. I'm afraid freedom of speech is retreating.
Well, that's an exact repetition of George Orwell. Thought crime.
And just like the Biden administration, they desperately tried to silence people for expressing their opinions. The Trump administration will do the opposite, and I hope we can work together on this. There's a new sheriff in Washington under the leadership of Donald Trump. We may disagree with your views, but we will fight for your right to express them in public, whether we agree with them or not.
This is exactly what Europe Dubrovsky doesn't want, and that's what scares them. That's why Charlie Kirk was killed. He was actually proposing a public debate. And for some reason, the left, well, as far as I've seen and heard, yes, always lost those debates. Because people suddenly heard not some caricature of an opinion about rights, but a real, genuine opinion, not some idiotic one made up by someone. So people would say, oh, guys, look, it seems like those ones we thought were wrong are actually right. And this is the death of socialism, the death of globalism, any kind of collectivism they've come up with. The European Union decided to stop the United States in disputes with the United States and our ideology by force. And they imposed a fine of 120 million euros on X, that is Elon Musk, for not providing the European Union with information about the sources of dissent. It's not enough they read it. They also need to know who paid for it, who's behind it, and that person's name. They need to know this because they want to make a kind of dark gray list. 120 million euros. Well, it won't break X, of course, but it's not a small amount either, and it will scare other platforms that aren't as powerful as Musk's. He, so to speak, Musk, refuses to censor what, from the American point of view, is an opinion different from the general European one. Any attack on platforms is an attack on freedom of speech, thinks Musk, thinks Trump, thinks Ruby, and I think so too. For example, in 2023-2024, I was taken down from Facebook and YouTube 8 times for, well, unclear rule violations. At the very least, I want to say it like this. And the algorithm that does this, it's not people checking, it's all checked automatically. It often doesn't separate your own views from repeating others' words when you say, for example, this kind of person. He calls for expelling a certain group of people from the country, and the algorithm takes it as if you yourself are calling to expel some racial group from the country and shuts down your channel. First, it could last 3 days, then a week, and eventually shut down entirely. In the United States, the First Amendment protects speech that authorities dislike it, but in Europe, it's the same as here. Gavin and the Democrats lost $76 billion, the grandest theft in California. So we had an audit in our state, and it turned out that under the wise leadership of the leading presidential candidate of the Democratic Party, that is Gavin Newsom, there was a shortage. There is a shortage, yes, of $76 billion. You may wonder, how is that possible? How can you lose $76 billion when you personally have to report to the tax office? And they'll take $76 from you. So if you make a mistake, they'll also make you pay a penalty or a fine, as they call it, for incorrect reporting. And the state of California, under the wise leadership, as I already mentioned, of Malashka Gavin, Nancy Pelosi's nephew, lost $76 billion, not million, but billion. Guess 3 times whose money that is. Gavin's? No, you didn't guess it. That's taxpayers' money, meaning mine, my children's, my friends, my neighbors, yours. It's our money. And he at best lost it, but at worst stole it. Well, not by himself, of course. With his associates, he doesn't bother with such things himself. The associates aren't just anyone from the party, right? So why just from one party? Do we have only one party here in California? There's only the great, mighty, invincible, foul-smelling, rotten, down-to-the-core people's Democratic, Fascist, Socialist Party. We don't have any others. I mean, they exist somewhere, kind of, but not close to power and not close to money. For $76 billion in money, even for the largest state in the United States, that's impressive. Republicans enviously call California the fraud capital of America, but they're not allowed at the trough, so all they can do is grit their teeth and be jealous. The auditors released a 92-page report in which governors and the heads of 8 agencies, well, agencies like ministries, so to speak, civilian agencies of California, well, I mean, I don't know, the managers of these agencies, who knows what they're called here, who, either out of negligence or malicious intent, called unreliable people. Either jerks or thieves, a hint at being a thief, yes. Those who forge, hide, and don't provide reports. If only they were at least submitting things and saying, this is here and this is here. If we asked for help, we'd seem like idiots. But if they hide and fake things, they're either idiots or thieves. Everything that happened shows. So in this report, it shows what could have happened because of Newsom. Interfered, simplified, canceled many established state procedures for verification and detection of fraud. Why he canceled them, Newsom does not explain. Well, it's like how the Democrats are always demanding to abolish identification verification during voting. They say you can't board a plane without it or enter a courthouse, but But why is it allowed when voting? Well, you immediately start to wonder why they're doing this, because common sense says, of course you need to find out. You want the voting to be fair, right? If you want it to be fair, then you need to check. But if you don't want it to be fair and want something else, then you absolutely have to forbid showing the law so that you have no right to show it. If you do, you get kicked out immediately. In addition, the same report found that the state's property, despite the billions allocated to repair and maintain it and so on, is still in poor condition. It's in a much, much worse and more dangerous condition than when our respected Gavin Newsom became governor. Let me give you an example. So, prisons from all over the world were sending requests to California for help related to COVID-19. And if the applicant was Black or Latino, they would receive a check or a bank transfer by mail. No one cared where they were, whether in Singapore, the Urals, San Diego, or Tijuana. After this nightmare was discovered and stopped, it turned out that $1 billion had been stolen. California, through its governor, vowed to find and return most, or at least some, of that money, but in the end did nothing about it. Those who promised to return the money were actually stealing it. I suspect the officials were involved. They would tell their gangster acquaintances what to write, send money in any amount to any point on the globe, so to speak, and profit from it. But that's just 1,076,000,000. Yes, gentlemen, there are still 75 more. Well, you can't talk about each one, so to speak, but the main figure is the following. At the moment, the state of California owes money, that is, it signed obligations, took money somewhere, spent it somewhere unclear, and it disappeared somewhere. It owes $1.4 trillion. The state of California owes $1.4 trillion and has no idea how to pay this money back. And now him, I won't name him, the Democratic Party wants to make him the President of the United States. Then they'll be able to steal not 76 billion, but maybe 76 trillion if they're lucky. They're upset Elon Musk has $1 trillion, but none of the many Democrats do, though they want it. If they steal 76 trillion, then 76 people would each have $1 trillion. Well, it's harder to earn it, honestly, than to steal it, so stealing is easier. California has around 39 million residents. They pay huge taxes, fees, regulations, surcharges, and levies. I think, in my opinion, more than anyone else in the United States of America. And at the same time, every year they spend over 40 billion more on who knows what than they collect from these absolutely huge amounts than they get from the highest taxes within the United States of America. Florida doesn't have any income tax at all, but they don't have a single penny of debt. In California, the taxes are the highest, and every year they're short by 40 billion. In Florida, all the planned and designed projects are completed, but in California, they're not. None of the announced initiatives ever get completed unless they spend 3 times more money on them than was originally allocated, and they ended up getting over 18 billion. They were supposed to build a high-speed rail line, I think from Los Angeles to San Francisco, maybe somewhere around there, but yes, to San Francisco for $18 billion. And they spent that money. Yes, they spent it. They made a plan and calculated the budget. By the way, even making the plan costs money. Yes, even though they were supposed to build the entire railway system and launch it for this huge amount of money. And Jevin made a plan, didn't lay a single meter of rails, and said that all the money was gone, everything was gone. Yes, we did the calculations, here are the figures, here's the plan, here it goes like this, here's how much it will cost here, and here, that's how much, here it is. This plan cost us $16 to $18 billion, the plan cost. Well, I mean, again, he's either a thief or an idiot. Honestly, I hope he's a thief, because it's scarier if he's an idiot. Another example. Californians for many years, let me remember, have been paying a tax on their smartphones to raise money. We were told that we needed to pay a little bit, so to speak, and we agreed. We voted for improving the instant response system. Well, we have 911, right? So we kept paying, but not a single cent. Now the report shows not a single cent, and there still isn't any instant response. According to the calculations, they collected $685 million, and now they can't find it. Well, no, they disappeared somewhere, right? But what do we have to do with it? They keep saying, but we. The money just disappeared without a trace. We don't know where it is, so why punish us or even scold us for it? Well, they spent $24 billion on the homeless, but where is the result? Nothing has changed. The problem still isn't solved. The streets, well, they're... Posters and tents are set up on every street, and those $24 billion are gone again, vanished. The magical land of California, money crawls away on its own like bedbugs, and money just disappears, but unlike bedbugs, it never comes back. Never, never. Even after the fire, we had a fire, you heard about it, right? Well, basically, the Pacific, a finger burned, and a huge amount of stuff burned down there too. Not a single penny went to improve the water supply, not a single one, even after that. There are 49 dams in the system, and the water supply system in California is in critical condition. And, well, they say that during Newsom's time as governor, the number of problems requiring immediate attention but not getting it, that is, repairs, has increased by 76. That's from the same report. There were 100 before, now there are 176. There's a possibility that in the coming years, California will receive 23% less water than it needs. If we don't address this urgently, as long as heaven or another Democrat is in charge, no one will do anything. Why bother? It's better to just keep writing checks. Oh, our problem isn't ending, we need more money. But if you fix it, no one will give you any more money. By the way, they've almost caught up with Tagaran. Yes, I told you about this. Now it's not enough. There are 9 million people living there, and they're planning to relocate 4.5 million people from Tagaran to another part of Iran because there's only enough water for half the population. They did it themselves. They did all of this themselves. They stole, they ruined everything with their own hands, and we are doing the same thing here with our own hands. Even though California wasn't bombed, that's how the subtitles have been lately. Let's just say yes. But there's a chance that our officials are so stupid that they really don't know where all that money is. In Tagaran, they definitely know where that money is. They're not stupid. Then that's a disaster, because if they really don't know, then it's a disaster. Because that means everywhere in Russia and Ukraine, for example, officials at least build villas in Italy. But ours might just not understand anything, not know, not be aware. It's quite possible, quite possible. Yes, gentlemen, it was a pleasure. Until next time.